Hi, everyone.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to Office Hours. Oh, sorry, you're hosting.
Please,
I thought someone asked me if I was hosting. You host. You host. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. It is Saturday. It's our testing and training day if you're new to the show, so you might see some faces that you don't see normally on the weekday show, some new hosts, new readers. And it's also a chance for us to try some different things in terms of how we produce the show. So it's our testing and training day. It's general Q&A. So if you have questions, get those into us by putting them into Makana. So you can go to Makana not only to submit your questions, but also to vote them up and down, as well as chat with the other producers. And if you're not in Makana and you're new to the show and you just picked us up at NAB last week or this week, just go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Get those questions into us 24/7, and then we'll get them here and answered. But TJ, let's get into the first question.
First up, Paul Wahus from Austin, Texas. And Paul says, can you sum up advances in video walls and micro LED displays in general and at NAB? Example, companies like Absenicon X Series and Worre Studios 360 walls folks from Office Hours post with.
Go ahead, Alex.
The main thing that we're seeing that's changing, and I have to admit I did not go there looking deeply at the walls, but the one thing that you see obviously is density. So we're seeing a lot of screens that are below 1.5 mil. So the problem with those is that they're flat. You can't curve them. So we see some of them curved at a higher rate. The other thing that we're seeing is portability, ease of use. A lot of this stuff is getting past the technology, and how hard is it to set them up? How reliable are they? How hard is it to swap one out? Brightness is usually not as big of a deal with these LED walls, but those are the things that we've seen change over the last 2 years. I have to admit that I did not look at LED walls and go and look at each one of those this time, but that's what we're seeing in general, and that's what people told me when they saw it is like, well, they're getting a lot smaller, and they're getting a lot easier to just pop out and put back in, and a lot of the drivers on the back end make a big difference as well.
There was one over at the Sony booth that was kind of in their theater that was, I'm not sure what the pitch on it was, but it was absolutely breathtaking to see. I think the one that excited me the most is there was a company that was not too far from the Office Hours booth that actually, they had a roll-up screen where it was segmented, where they could put it in it was heavy enough to put a floor on. I think Bill might have been there. Pretty cool technology in terms of the ability to take things and move them around. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. John says, in the past month, I have found my ATEM Mini Extreme freezing, like the old gray screen issue, multiple times a day, even when joining back-to-back meetings and teams. No adjustments to camera. Anyone else seeing more issues?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I've had a few issues with lockup, and not every day, but it happens sometimes. And also, one of the outputs on my ATEM gets orange sometimes, and a power boot will restore it. So it's kind of weird. But what I try to do is at least power it off when I'm not using it.
Ronnie?
I've seen this happen when we have ground loops coming through, for instance, using the mic input from a sound mixer, which is connected to some other stuff, even here in Norway. I know this is a huge problems elsewhere in the world. And when I did this small trick by adding radial J-ISO, kind of XLR to balanced to unbalanced adapter from radial, the problem seemed to have vanished. Other things I can mention is temperature, if it's getting hot. I had just recently one of my ATEMs go dead on me just because the fan inside was stopping, probably because of dust or something else that appeared into the device. So it stopped running, and eventually it got too hot without me understanding that. So if you start it up and hear nothing and it's getting hot, that's a sign that the fan has gone for a walk. So just check that as an extra thing.
Yeah, the other thing, when you plug in the Extreme, when it first receives power, you'll hear the fans kind of whir a little bit. It's worth it to pay attention to what does that whir sound like, because then when all of a sudden the pitch drops because it's spinning at a lower speed, or you don't hear the whir at all, that can be your giveaway that it's time to put some compressed air in there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wants to know, would any of the cloud production platforms, TriCaster Vectar, for example, have cost-effective lab licenses available for non-commercial experimentation and learning? I have a Proxmox server at home.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yes, I understand. They are providing you with software you can test, and you will have, of course, watermarks, etc. And as I can remember, there is no limitations to what you can do with the server or the software. So just contact the Wizard T gang, and I'll think they hook you up and give you the things you need.
And Alex.
Yeah, we're going to be working with Viz on Vector in the very short term. So in May, we'll be doing some trainings with them, as well as making it available to a wider group here to kind of try to see if we as a group can learn how to use it effectively. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up in May.
Next question.
Matthew LeCount in Oakland wants to know, are the costs of getting a carnet based on value of gear or set fees?
Go ahead, Alex.
There are some set fees, and then there's the value of the gear. So usually there's a couple. It depends on. There's a couple of things that it depends on when you're shipping out of country. There is a bond that you're going to pay that is connected to the value of what you're putting out, and then there is a set fees. And if you process it, if you do more of the work on your carnet in the United States, at least, you'll pay less. So if you put in a lot, you can put in a lot of groundwork. You can kind of just send something like Boomerang, who was on our show a couple months ago. You can just send them, the information. They'll work with you, but it'll cost more if they have to process it. What we do is very carefully put it into a Excel file, and we have all of our serial numbers and all of our items and all their values, and that processes very quickly, and it's considered a little less expensive there. Typically, we might move. To put it in perspective. For our carnets, we would move typically $50,000 to $100,000 of gear in and out of the country, and we'd pay maybe $800 for a carnet. That's kind of what we expected.
Ronnie?
Yeah, this is a question to Alex. So when we are flying from, let's say, Norway and coming into the United States, is it better to use a company here in Scandinavia or Europe to create those carnets, or is it better for us to actually have a U.S. company make this documentation? I
would do it locally, and I don't think it matters. It's a very standardized process. So so it is. Who you're working with, as long as you trust them, and I would probably do it again locally. You may find it just hard to do. You have to transfer money to them. So it'd be easier to do it with a local company that can manage your carnet. But basically that document should be the same for every country. That's the whole idea. So basically what happens is with a carnet, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, a carnet is there are about 100 and I believe 100 and some companies, 110, I think, countries that are what we call carnet countries. And what they've done is they've decided the problem you get into is that you have to, if you didn't have this, you have to pay customs on the way in, then you have to file it out and get customs on the way out. And it's really messy. So what these carnet countries did is they created an environment where there's a system of trust. And the way that works is you go to an airport before you leave, or you don't have to go to the airport. You can also, if you're shipping it, you can just take it to the shipper, and a lot of your shippers will process it. If you go to something like Rocket is a shipper that we use often, and Rocket will do all this for you. You're just going to hand them stuff. They'll manage all this in the back end. But when we are flying out with lots of gear, what we do is you go to the airport, you go to customs, you say, I have a carnet to process. They take it in. Oftentimes what they do is they take random samples. Show me this item. Show me this item. And the more organized you are, by the way, so what we do is we have a manifest that we have with us that is every item in every case. So I might walk up there with 20 cases and say, I have this, and they'll say, and if you have 20 cases and they say, show me this serial number, and you open up case 8 and you pull it right out and show it to them, they stop asking. They're like, okay, you got it. You got this figured out. And so then they stamp it and they say all of this stuff on this sheet left the United States. When you get to the other side, it's very important that you do the same thing. And they pull a tab. They pull one of the sheets out that says they have a record of what went, and they can put it into their files. Then you land in Germany or you land somewhere else, especially Germany. Be very careful about it; they're really picky. Anyway, so you land in your other country, and they go through that process, and they certify that everything entered the country the way that they expected it. Then you go out and do your business, and then you come back to when you leave that country, you say, I got to process this carnet again. You go to customs, and then they look at your stuff and they certify that everything is leaving with you. And then you get back on the plane, and when you get back and you land, you go back to customs again, and they say, yes, everything arrived back. So it creates a full loop of trust. Or kind of, we're doing the best we can. It's a little, there's a lot of wow and flutter in there, but in general, that's how that works. But it's pretty effective, and I have to admit that I will charge more to a client if they put me in a country that doesn't have a carnet, isn't a carnet country, because it's a lot of work. I mean, like in Ecuador, you have to file an invoice. It has to say invoice on it to the government of all the gear that you have. And I don't quite understand why that works, but there's an invoice that you have to have of all the gear that you have, and you send it to them weeks ahead of time, and then they may or may not approve it. And then they'll tell you that you can come, but they don't send you anything back. And then you hire a fixer, and then your brother shows up and has drinks, and then the gear is there, and he doesn't know exactly how all that happened. So anyway, those are the So in other countries, it gets really, really complicated and messy, and everything else. In Brazil, it's really complicated because they're a non-carnet country, and we tend to try to hire. Now, I admit we tend to try to hire most of our gear locally in Brazil. As a result, anything that we can't put into something that looks like a suitcase. So you don't take Pelican cases into Brazil, because then we'd have to figure it out, and we haven't figured it out very well.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I had this situation coming into Los Angeles a few years back, where we have a suitcase. We were traveling like tourists, and the border control was really kind of asking lots of questions to what we would supposed to be doing there, etc. Of course, this was camera equipment in the thousands of dollars range. So it's probably advisable to have a carnet. And as we spoke here, or as Alex spoke here, I found out for our Norwegian viewers, it's actually the local Næringsforening, or what you call it. It's called. So it's the local chambers of commerce that actually handle this in Norway, and they have offices in all the big cities in Norway. So just contact your local chamber of commerce or Næringsforening, and you will be handling that in a good way when you travel abroad with lots of expensive equipment, at least.
And if you're trying to justify the value of paying a service like Boomerang Carnet to help you with the carnet, you should do it yourself, or try to. It's like then you remember, similarly, why do I hire an accountant for taxes? It's complicated. It's a legal document. You want to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's, and your Pelican cases will draw attention. I was flying domestically, and I was going through security with my 1510, and they said, "What's in the case, sir?" Didn't ask anybody else. The Pelican draws attention. So you want to make sure that your act's together. And the more organized and professional you are at customs, the less hassle you're going to get in general.
And we find that expensive cases like Tumis and other things tend not to get opened because they don't look like, why would you put gear in there? And so I have a lot of expensive Tumis, little carry-ons, because what we did is we cored them out and put all this padding in them, and we put our gear in there. Italy is where we use Tumis. It's not a carnet country, if you're wondering. Not that I'm bitter.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. Douglas says, if I wanted to add Dante I/O expansion to my Yamaha DM3, is it best to stick with a Yamaha Tio1608-D2 unit, or would any Dante I/O device work if I patched it to the DM3 via Dante Controller?
Well, the answer is that anything will work with Dante if you have Dante. So the first answer is that. So yes, you don't have to stick to that. That's the whole idea of Dante, is that if you've got other Dante devices, that they'll work. Mickey said it depends on what you need to interface with. For analog I/O, the TO will work, and you will get HA control on the DM3.
Next question.
From Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. If a computer only has a single Thunderbolt 4-port and I'm using a Decklink Quad 2 Duo, would it be a bad idea to plug anything else into the Sonnet box's second port, like an external SSD for recording?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I don't think it shouldn't. I mean, you should be able, if you've got another card there should be enough power there to power the card. So if the card will fit, I think it will work. I don't think there's anything, but I don't use anything. It should work. But I will say that I don't put anything else in there, because if on a Duo, if you're using all of those ports, you're using a lot of bandwidth. And so if you're putting an SSD and then trying to draw to that SSD, I think you'd have a bandwidth problem with the Thunderbolt. So that'd be the thing that I would worry about. I don't think there should be a power. I mean, if you put something high powered in there, but if you're putting an SSD driver in there and the second one, it might work. I would never do it. I like single missions for my boxes, and so I wouldn't do it. But I don't think that that it would be impossible to work.
Your litmus test for this, Scott, might be: am I getting paid or not? If you're getting paid or not, headroom becomes a lot more important.
Yeah.
Next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in San Jose, California. Tlaloc says, is there a machine learning solution that could look at a PDF, Excel doc, Word doc, or the like and propagate your calendar? On the flip side, could have a conversational prompt for your calendar, i.e. ask, what are we doing at the end of April 2025?
Go ahead, TJ.
I do know that in Microsoft Azure, they do have an AI solution that will read through a PDF and you can extract data. I've used it programmatically before, but not tried to tie that into my calendar specifically. I'm curious if the embedded chat GPT that's as part of the Bing or the Edge browser would get you somewhere.
Alex?
I don't think I didn't mean to raise my hand. Sorry.
No worries. So, Tlaloc, the other thing that I might look at is if you have something as a PDF, a lot of times the Adobe built-in export PDF to Excel works surprisingly well. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of finagling to get the merge cells and formattings and things like that figured out. But if you have it into an Excel format, if you have I think it might be open to ChatGPT standard now, but at least with GPT Plus, you can upload a file. So you could say, hey, this is my CSV. This is where all of my this is a calendar, a set of calendar invites. Can you convert this into a format that like a .ics might understand? And then when you kind of try to do the interchange back and forth that way, after some trial and error, you should be able to find a way to get it to spit something useful out. I had it, I had to write me an Apple script the other day to do some data manipulation, just to take a spreadsheet in one format and take it to another. And I went back and forth for a little while, but it produced some surprisingly good results. Next question.
Khalid Al-Jamaya from Hassa, Saudi Arabia says, good morning, office hours. Jason Bache showed a keynote tip about a website that offers subscription to unlimited vector graphics that can be imported to Keynote. What was the name of the website? Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's called the Noun Project, and this is it here. I subscribe to it. I love them. I mean, it really has been kind of transformational. A lot of SVGs, and I've figured out mostly how to convert them. It's a little bit of a process to convert them to shapes in Keynote, but you have to break them apart a couple times sometimes to get that to work. But I've been able to start doing those, and so I've been grabbing the ones that I like there. So you have, I'm not logged in right now. I'm not going to hold on. Let me cut away so making sure I can log in here. But there's a lot of, anyway, the Noun Project is the answer. And I needed an icon that I need to put on a screen, and I searched camera, and there's like 200 cameras that I could look at to decide which one I wanted to grab. And so there's lots and lots and lots of options. It's got 5 million icons, I think, and it's great.
And it's all you can eat once you're in there?
Yeah, it's a subscription, I think. Let me see I don't remember what I paid. The icons themselves are, there's different subscriptions, but it was like $30 for the year or something like that.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly bad because now I'm only getting the icons. They have images and other things and everything else, but I'm just doing the icons there.
And they do have if you want to give it a try, they have a basic plan where they have some icons that are under Creative Commons that you can download for free. So if you want to try the service and see if it works in your workflow and you like the output, you can do a little bit of a test run before you actually go ahead and plunk down on the paid plan. But like Alex said, it's not very expensive once you get in there. Next question.
Coming in from Seattle, Washington, Guy Cochran wants to know, how good is DJI's Focus Pro?
It has lasers. Go ahead, Alex.
I don't know. The guy threw a Cochrane, but he's not here. He threw a Cochrane, but the receiver did another. They went somewhere else. So anyway, I haven't tested it yet. I think that overall we've seen a lot of great performance out of the DJI products, and so I'm going to guess that it's probably doing a pretty good job. I believe this one is based on LiDAR, so it's got a LiDAR focus system, which is what a lot of us wish that Blackmagic would do, because I think that would definitely improve the experience, of what's happening there. So it looks really, really good, and hopefully we'll get to see more of it.
And when you get the combo kit, though, you are looking at just shy of $2,000 to get into this. So it's definitely a not the cheap solution, but
I believe that the range is kind of insane, though. I mean,
really?
That's the big thing. Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, that DJI, the big thing with them is that they did all these drones, and so they figured out all this stuff that lets them do a lot of work that is really far away. so anyway, I think that's typically the
I'm
the
just popped
there.
into B&H. The creator combo is only $1,000 to get the starter pick. I was picking the all inclusive one.
I mean, the ones that I'm used to working with are like start at $15,000. So $2,000 is a pretty good deal for a remote focus.
And didn't they focus? They had started playing with the LiDAR technology with as part of the Ronin, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Ronin 40 has it built in, and this one is not one that I had time to really look at in depth. But I think that that what they're doing, the 40 is a transformational camera. Like it is just really, it's not for everybody. There's actually not a lot of uses that I would have for it, for the kind of work that I do. But I have to say, it's the first camera that we've seen in a long time that was like, oh, that's completely different. And I can see how if I needed something, I would use that. That's the step up of like, I need to do some kind of steady work, but I don't have the money to hire a proper Steadicam operator. And this is the step up from the other Ronins and other things that are stabilizers. It's a really interesting camera for, I think, a lot of corporate, potentially some creative stuff. I think that once you start talking about film, you go back to Steadicam operators. So it's, and that comes down to precision of the shot. Precision framing is something that you get. A lot of these stabilizers will give you a great smooth shot, but a lot of times when you're dealing with a film, there's things that go out of the frame that have to stay out of the frame, and sometimes that tolerance is very tight. You know exactly what you need to do, and so that's why you need a Steadicam operator that can actually control it perfectly in that environment. It's not just smoothing out what you're doing, but it's actually building a precision, complex shot. And so, but again, DJI has been really, really good at putting a lot of this stuff together.
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, as CJ mentioned for a minute ago, then they also have a add-on for gimbals, like the RS2 and RS3 Pro. So you can, I haven't used it myself, but they have this add-on that you can put on top of the camera, and it's like it's a LiDAR that controls the focus motor. So I'm sure the new one will be better, but I haven't tested it myself.
Yeah, when you're looking at this Focus Pro or you're looking at products like the Raven Eye, it really amplifies the fact that DJI, by, like Alex said, spending so much time in the drones, has had to come up with how do I augment the camera that's there with all these other systems to make it smoother, to help it track? I mean, even in their Osmo products, they're really aggressive about putting that technology into helping it track. And that's where somebody that doesn't have a large crew and doesn't have a huge budget can really start to, as a creator, start to play in a bigger sport. So it's pretty cool. Next question.
Francis Fry from Cambridge, Massachusetts says, I have two Sony cameras passing through HDMI to SDI 12G microconverters to a Hyperdeck Extreme 8K. I want to record both camera feeds within the 8K, but I can't find documentation explaining how to do it. The first camera records beautifully.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I think the reason is for not finding documentation that it's not possible. I think you need to add a quad splitter or a combiner in front of the 4 inputs so that you actually can record up to 4 different 4K resolutions cameras into the combiner and then record the combined result. I don't think it's possible. Maybe they can add a future firmware for this, but as of now, I don't think it's possible.
Next question.
Jeff Feely from Henderson, Texas asks, is there any way to force a TV to always show a specific input, such as HDMI 1, if it doesn't have an auto-detect setting?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, this is kind of a thing to dig into. You can hack this a little bit. Many years back, I did this using a remote control that actually controlled everything and just switched on the TV and then a few seconds later switched HDMI input. But as I read your question, you have a pretty old TV, so I would probably just go with a learnable remote control, if that's possible, if you're using the remote control the original remote control. It could be possible that you can learn it to do some tricks as well, but I would go for a learning remote control to do this in a sequence.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, when I first read this question, I was thinking showing a specific input format, but then as I read it again, I realized that maybe it's just showing, HDMI 1 always, not the format. And so I've got an older television that I have buttons that I actually have to manually change to if I want to go to the HDMI or if I want to go to the, the old S video input or whatever it is. So an older TV you have to manually do this anyway. And so, if it's a question of wanting to always show one channel, then perhaps you can get some sort of box to always have everything coming into HDMI 1, but have a, I can't think of the name of the breakout box type of thing where you have various inputs coming in and like an HDMI switcher that can then always bring everything into the single channel.
Yeah, and depending on the brand of the TV or the AVR, if you have a receiver that's going into it, sometimes you can even disable inputs that aren't in use, so it's not going to necessarily recognize that, hey, this input has something plugged in or doesn't. But you can say just turn off HDMI 2 and HDMI 3, and hopefully that puts you down the right path. All right, next question.
Peter Jonasson from Sweden says, Blackmagic Design once again took another step by utilizing USB-C for power and DP to their new EVF, electronic viewfinder. Fragile perhaps, but space-saving. Will this lead the way for less expensive systems?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I hope that they open up a SDK or something so other manufacturers can interface with these cameras even more. Blackmagic has also other accessories that you can use, like on the studio cameras. They've got the focus and the zoom controls that also use the USB-C. So I think it's, and of course, not the most reliable connection, but the advantage with it is that you can use it all in one cable, and it's as simple and inexpensive. So there's pros and cons.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I will admit that it scares me a little bit that we have a USB-C. It doesn't bother me as much because I don't really use EVFs very much. As a live person, EVFs I really feel like are a film person thing because at live we usually have big monitors or we have other monitors or we're viewing it somewhere else. I mean, usually the EVF isn't big enough to be super useful. So I think that it's a little bit, but at the same time, the USB-C is the nature of the connector is not something I'd prefer to have a ton of on my camera. I think that's it's a non-locking, fragile, easily bent system. So it'd make me a little nervous. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, when you're filming for post or you're doing film work, time is money because you have people standing around who can't afford to have you wait on your monitor. And if you're live and all of a sudden that single point of failure happens and you don't have power or video to your monitor and you don't know what you're looking at, you're putting a pretty high risk in there. So it is cool. It is a little bit cleaner, but you just got to weigh your risks. Next question.
Jeff Feely from Henderson, Texas says, have you gotten your hands on the DJI Pocket 3? If so, what are your thoughts on using this for recording or live streaming?
Go ahead, Alex.
I have an earlier one. I haven't played with the Pocket 3 yet, but I have an earlier one. I don't know if I would use it for either one. I mean, I'd use it for capturing some small details or things that I'm going to add into things. I don't think I would use it for something. I wouldn't use it as the core of my production, probably, but I definitely enjoy the fact that you have something in your pocket that you can get a nice smooth shot in. So I think that's kind of, it's been interesting. The problem is now at this point, my phone has a better camera in it than the Pocket 3 in my opinion. And so the Osmo looks more interesting to me to do a lot of that capture because I can capture ProRes on iPhone 15 with a better lens or a better sensor than what I can get with the Pocket 3. So that's the problem that I have is that it is bigger than, the Osmo for the phone is bigger than the Pocket 3, but at the same time, it folds up into something almost that's very, very small. And I can put it in my pocket, and I'm going to get a better image, in my opinion, out of the phone. So that's what's kind of kept me from using the Pocket, continuing to upgrade. I've got two of them. I've got 1 and 2. So I bought the first one I think I had to wait for it to show up because I bought it so early because I was going to Cambodia and I used it a lot there. And it was great to have something little in my pocket, but I think I'd probably just pull out my phone at this point.
The other thing, if you have the Pocket 2 and you're looking at the Pocket 3, the 3 is quite a bit heftier than the Pocket 2. Like in your hand, it feels larger. We used it out at the Eclipse for some of the time lapses that we did. And for those kind of things, it was perfect because if I could say, I'm going to put this into almost like an appliance. Okay, shot's going to start here. It's going to end here. You're going to take a picture every 2 seconds. And then at the end of it, you're going to give me a fat folder with DNGs of every single capture it took. Is it the highest quality that I would use for, recording a hero shot or recording myself on a live stream? No. But if you have those creative single insert, single purpose kind of creative shots, it's another tool in your toolkit. Next question.
A QR code question from Sigmund Judge in London. I have a replacement mechanical valve, and while it's not audible all the time, on a bad day, my valve click is broadcasting like a chewing sound on my podcasting vocal. Do you have any tips to negate the issue I'm having?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, it doesn't say if this is for live production or if it's recording. It could be read as this is for recording since you mentioned podcast. And if that's the case, you can, if you cannot sound insulate the valve itself, and I guess you can't, you can do some clever repair on the audio files afterwards. And if it's only you talking, like we are doing here, you can apply some filters or plugins to that audio pipeline you are using to produce your final results. And there are a plethora of plugins that you can use. We are using Isotope RX for cleaning up audio in our studio. But if your budget is kind of limited, you can use free plugins. There are a few of those. And I've heard people, and I've tried it myself, the Clarity VX from Waves is a plugin that probably most host applications like you are editing your podcast in will accept. And it does a decent job. It's based on a lot of good code to identify your voice and separate that out from background noise. And it's more advanced to just remove cats or animals or whatever you have of noise in your house. So I'll give that a try and see if that can remedy your problem. It is. I think it's a evaluation copy. You can test run for a few days, and then you can purchase either the simple one or the most advanced one. So try that first and see what your result will be.
Next question.
Carson Jones from Coburg via the QR code. Is there a 10 gigabyte network storage drive that you would recommend that will use NVMe storage? I'm looking to add an 8 terabyte drive to my grading suite to use for program cache, for example, Resolve or Adobe Suite, Maxon One, etc.
Go ahead, Alex.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use a NAS for that kind of cache. If you're doing kind of near storage that you want to have a lot of data on, I think that might make sense. But if I were doing that, I would really connect it with the fastest connection you can possibly have with your computer. So if you're using I'm not sure if you're using a Mac or a PC. On a Mac, it would be a Thunderbolt connection. But you really want to have an NVMe, in my opinion, an NVMe drive connected with the absolute fastest way that you can connect it to your computer. Time is so important, and write time and all kinds of other things is really problematic. So I just really wouldn't suggest doing anything other than the absolute fastest connection you can make to your computer.
Next question.
Kieran Raval from Leicester, UK via the QR code. NAB coverage was fantastic. The handheld mics should have had mic flags with Office Hours Global and QR codes for questions and QR codes for contributors to scan after their contribution so that they could go and watch themselves.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, we thought about mic flags. There's a great mic flag company, and I looked at it. We just ran out of time. There was a lot of innovation that we did. That during, but a lot of times it's I always say the first is the worst, and so that this was the first time we did a bunch of things, and so I think that we have used it. I know that Mickey said the SM58 does not work well with mic flags, but we've done a lot of mic flags on SM58s, and so they are a little bit short for it, but you can hold them and make it work. But I wouldn't. I don't really like mic flags that much. I did think about them. I think about those kind of branding. I feel a little too broadcasty. I mean, what I'd like to do is find a way. We thought I brought 2 headsets, a DPA and a Countryman, and I had originally planned to hand them those, and the problem really got into is I just didn't know how I could do that quickly. Like how can I? And I've got some ideas on how to make that a little easier. You have a couple of problems with the audio. There is, I feel like the SM58s did such a good job that you didn't feel like you were at the show, and that's so if you listen to the audio, it's like dead quiet most of the time, and so the problem really is that. I wanted to have something that brought in a little bit more air, but trying to get someone to put a loop on, so you can either do a one ear loop, and then it has a tendency to want to swing out. And if you have a 2-ear loop, if someone's got long hair behind them or anything else, it becomes like this is now an art project to get it on, and they don't like it, and you don't like it, and nobody likes it. And so there's a little bit of like trying to figure that out. I find that oftentimes in an environment like this, a lav. Some people will use, but you're now fighting physics. You're getting pretty far away from somebody. You're in a busy place, and if anything's loud, it's going to be hard to hear them. And so that becomes another challenge. So these are all the things. And then if we have a shotgun, if it's camera mounted, we can kind of do that as long as we keep on looking at the person. But what if we want to look at the object? Now we can't hear them. And so I have some ideas related to how to make that work a little bit better. Potentially even having a second person sitting there just pointing at them, like with a shotgun that's out of frame. That might be something we want to play with a little bit. So we're kind of thinking through that. We'll continue to evolve that. Right now, the SM58 was the thing that we worked on, but we'll keep testing that. I think that the mic is one of those things one of the many things from last week or this last week that we want to evolve.
It's such a calm environment with not a ton going on. You should just get a boom op, and I'm sure that won't be in the way of anything.
Just have a boom op walking around. I've often thought that I need a boom op. Just give everybody IFBs and boom ops, then you can talk it, all the time. Just if for the person who has everything.
Next question.
QR code from London. Martin says, What are your impressions of the PTZ Optics HIVE PTZ controller software, which comes with cloud capabilities? It highlights integrated auto tracking and color correction functionalities and is compatible with over 400 PTZ cameras.
Go ahead, Alex.
It looks impressive. I looked at it. The interface, I don't think I have it up here now, but it gives you a nice online interface to be able to control your PTZs. I think that there's definitely a value for that. I mean, I think most of the time I like to use the host software with the cameras that it came with, so you get the full capability, whatever you paid for. But I have to admit, these days, the only camera I'm using for PTZs is the Sony FR7. So I don't really, I need everything that software provides for that camera. It does look like if you're not using something like that you could probably get it probably would be pretty useful for getting a hold of a lot of those things and having a software control that could potentially use multiple cameras and control them from there. But it looks interesting. Haven't used it in a production.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney from Las Vegas, Nevada, via the QR code says, within Apple Finder, is it better to drag and drop items or copy and paste?
Go ahead, TJ.
From my perspective, my own personal usage, in Windows, I use copy and paste, Control-C, Control-V more often. And in Mac, I find the Command-C, Command-V, copy-paste doesn't work quite as well. So on the Mac, I always end up copying or dragging and dropping rather than using the keystrokes.
Yeah, the other thing, Chester, you got to ask yourself, are we trying copy and paste? You're going to duplicate a file versus unless you're option dragging, a drag and drop's going to move the file. If you're specifically talking about, I want to validate my copy, then on the Mac, you want to look at a product like Carbon Copy Cloner that after the copy, it's actually going to go verify that all of the media went from point A to point B and that you're not going to have any corruption. Because when you have these huge files, it's worth the extra couple minutes to know. Next question.
Via the QR code, Gabriela Eshesha Mestiera from Sault Ste. Marie says, Gary Clark released JPEG RAW that's doing a new direction from what they were doing. What does this mean for the imaging and video communities? How does it impact the creative world?
Go ahead, Alex.
We'll see. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily do anything until they can persuade people to actually use it. There are so many formats that are floating out there right now that say RAW on them that I don't, the problem that they'll have is not so much that it'll impact it or not impact it as can they get pickup, and it has to show some ROI. Like, why would we use something new? So if they can figure that out, it could make a big impact. But I think JPEG 2000 is now going to JPEG XS. Another version of this, you have to talk to camera manufacturers and who have their own formats or they're using ProRes, and so I think it's an uphill battle, but they might be able to get somewhere with it.
Next question.
Peter Jonasson from Sweden says, I've been looking for a desk-mounted, low-profile swivel mic arm, boom arm for my SM7B. Any recommendation?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, Koenig & Meyer has a few that could be used. We use them at the office, which is also hiding the cable inside the arm itself. It's pretty low budget to be coming from Koenig & Meyer, so look at that page. Another one is actually something called Elgato Wave, and this is the low profile, and I know Alex has a kind of similar type than this, but in a higher quality. Be aware that the Wave arm does not have springs, so having a kind of heavy mic like the Shure you are mentioning could maybe pose a problem. So I would test that before doing that. I have my MV7, which is a little bit lighter than your mic, and that works perfectly. And there is also possibility to hide the cable inside the arm itself, and it's hovering above everything I have on the table: cables, remote controls, mixer surfaces, and I even have a small magic arm fastened to it. And on that magic arm, on the end of that, I have my MixPre 6 hovering over everything, and it looks beautiful. I just wish I could show you a picture from a desk, but it's too messy.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, I believe Alex and I use the same arm. I'm using the OC White low profile arm, and once you go low profile, you'll never go back. And I love, when I need to get out of my way, it's gone.
Alex?
Yeah, and I have the OC White as well. And it's a if you're willing to pay the extra money, I have both of them. I have the Elgato Wave. The Elgato Wave for the price is great. Like it is a really good value. It's about, I think it's $99 or something like that. It works really well. It doesn't feel the same. I mean, obviously, if you have an OC White, you're going to go, well, I'm going to use the OC White. Like it takes more weight. It's more adjustable. It has more vertical, movement and so on and so forth. It's got one extra link. It's got one extra joint to it. So there's a little bit of there's some extra. Extra pieces to it. But when we send something out to somebody else, I don't send them OC Whites. I send them the Waves, the Wave LP. I think it's a really solid value for what you have. There's someone else that's doing one that I want to test that's lower than that. It's like $69 I saw on Amazon, but I haven't tried it yet.
The Newer came out with the Bill turned me on to it a couple weeks ago. It was an $80 one, and it is similar to the Elgato for the first two sections, but the third section actually has a gas spring arm and lets it go up and down, which is a lot nicer. And for the price, it's very good. So Newer, our friends at Newer. Next question.
Ronnie Hofse from Tromsø, Norway says, during the office hours broadcast, is it okay to switch the camera in ZoomOSC Video Source selector to cut to another USB UVC camera source, or is it ATEM only switching? Thinking of sync changing in the constellation.
Go ahead, Alex.
Can you explain what you're doing, Ronnie?
So I have my different ATEM camera sources coming in through my ATEM, going into ZoomOSC as the UVC through the webcam connection. And I also have a couple of Insta360s connected to the same machine. So could I then do the switching to show something? Mm-hmm. Let's say the last question, can I just switch inside the Zoom, or will that cause the frame to glitch in Zoom?
You definitely couldn't do it live. But what I would do is I'd probably look at something like Ecamm or Mimo Live. I mean, I would use Mimo Live because that's what I use for that kind of thing.
That was what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so I would have the switcher be one source and Mimo Live be another source, and Mimo can definitely do that. And you can set up layers and an iPad thing and click on it and everything else. The only thing I would do is make sure that those aren't showing your mouth, because you will have an audio sync issue between the UVCs and the switcher. So that'd be the thing to think about. But you could definitely use them as little overhead cameras and so on and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney from Las Vegas, Nevada, and via the QR code says, how big does my 3D printer need to be to print a new motorcycle helmet? Only using it for fun and show. I don't own a motorcycle.
Happy that last caveat's in there. Go ahead, TJ.
Well, I do own a motorcycle, and motorcycle helmet is a sphere of roughly about 12, 13 inches in diameter. So whatever you print is going to need to be, if you print two half spheres and glue them together, you're going to need to have at least like a 12 by 12 or maybe a little bit bigger platen for it to print on. And then if you're trying to do the whole volume, then of course it's got to be the cube, 12 by 12 by 12. And for the money, you can just go buy an El Cheapo motorcycle helmet for like $20. One that I would never wear, but for $20, why not?
Next question.
Paul Wall, who's from Austin, Texas, says, okay, this is a gaming tower, but would it make a great video editing system? What would be the alternatives for a video editing tower system? And provides a link.
Well, it doesn't run Final Cut if it's a Lenovo. Oh, no, wait, Alex, you have something.
I was going to say a Mac Mini. A Mac Mini would be a great editing system, or Mac Studio. Let me see here. It's let's see. I don't know what do they have here? i5. I wouldn't. To be honest, I don't think I would edit with less than an i7. So I think the i5 is going to be underperforming. i7 or i9 is what you want to look at. You're probably going to want to look at, if you're doing anything that any work, I'd probably go for a little bit more than 16 gigs. To make that actually happen there. The graphics card 3060, you can probably do some stuff with that. So I think that I'd get more RAM for it, and I'd get an i7. Those would be the two things that I would do. But I'm not as everyone knows, not a huge PC expert.
Yeah, and I also think about you could get a pretty decent Mac Mini for $1,400. I mean, this isn't necessarily a budget computer, but yeah, like we said, if you are going down into the PC space, there's a couple things you could upgrade there. Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan. I'm going to use my setup later this year. What are the things I should address to make sure I'm stable? I have 2 Mac Mini M1s, Stream Deck, an ATEM Mini Pro, update software, and what else?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Well, I would at least be careful of updating the software right before you're going to do some kind of production. So perhaps you want to hold off a little bit and you want to do some testing beforehand. And also, I would say that the internet connection is probably one of the most important things. And then you want to test and test and test again, because that's the best way to find any glitches that you could experience.
Next question.
From Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. Paul says, last Thursday, a new 98-inch Samsung DU9000 Crystal 4K TV rolled. Compare with the previously discussed 98-inch TCL for gaming and for an LED wall.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this is the thing. Prices are coming down. The 9,000 here is $4,000. So it's it looks pretty good. And 98 inches, the new 85 or whatever. I think that we're now seeing more and more. I was talking to somebody who had a 98 inch in their at home, and they definitely don't go to the theater anymore. they like that hit a size that was there. I think that if you're using it as an LED wall behind you, I think that's what you're planning to do, Paul. I don't think it's going to make any difference between the TCL and the Samsung. If I'm actually watching video, I have seen that TCL sometimes have some color scaling issues, and so I don't know I don't know how systematic that is, but it does. There's some things with the TCL that I'm not sure that I would want to use for action stuff outside of games. But as a background monitor, I think the TCL works great. And if it's less expensive, then go for that. But if you're actually using for other things, the Samsung might be something you want to look at.
Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, just talking on the pricing. I remember when the first 80-inch LED TVs came into the country. Best Buy by my house had one of the first 3 that came in. They had it on display, and it was $25,000. Now you're getting almost 100 inches for $4,000. That's amazing.
The one thing I will say about that is that you do have to take into account that that as that monitor gets bigger, you're going to have problems with your speakers. If you're just doing pure stereo, it's fine. But if you're doing surround, remember that you keep on moving the speakers out, and so that becomes a little bit more problematic. Just sound in general, because you have a huge area that isn't generating any audio. Now there are some technologies that Samsung's working on and others where it bounces the sound off of the speaker, and speaker bars become more important there as well. But it's not quite the same as having them in that front field of view.
The other thing that I would be hesitant for, just because I've had 2 Samsung TVs in a row that have had not really even blacks and sometimes not even brights. So I'm okay when I'm watching the football game, but then when all of a sudden there's a pan, I see these big shadows on the screen. And I thought, because I'm, getting the nicer Samsung TV, I'm not going to have that issue. But it still ended up coming up. So it would be worth it to see a panel like this or a panel in the same line, just at a smaller size, in a store, and just make sure that you're happy with the picture quality and the consistency across the monitor before you plunk down $4,000. Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan. I have an LG UHD AI Thing 4K TV to add to my setup. It's a 43UR80. Panel, please give me suggestions for this in my setup.
Go ahead, Alex.
What are you going to do with it? I think that you have to figure out what you want to do. It's 43 is kind of this in between where I don't know exactly where you would put it. So you can't really put it behind you. I wouldn't put it in the, I don't know what to do with a 43 inch. I guess that would be the challenge that I would have, is that it's, I have 24s all the way around because they're very portable and I can move them around. I put them on arms. And then I have bigger ones that I use for review and so on and so forth. But I don't have the 43 is kind of an in between. You could theoretically build a giant teleprompter. I have a 48. It might be a 43 back there that I'm working on building a teleprompter for, so that I have this giant screen in front of me here. So that would be the thing to do, is potentially construct one. And if I construct my 43 inch, I'll send you the plans, or just send you a piece. I'll just I'll cut two. Why make one when you can make two for twice the price?
Next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida says, great NAB production. A ruthless review type of question. Did you consider or test running the live NAB audio through some real-time voice isolation tools like Clarity VX Pro to knock down ambient conversations?
Go ahead, Alex.
We didn't. And the reason for that is that you kind of want to hear things around you, hear that you're there. So I think that was the consideration that we had there, was that you actually wanted to hear the process. I think that if anything, we didn't get enough ambient. So one of the things, for Cinegear, we are going to focus much more on the HDR 5.1 solution. So we'll be sending in ambient as ambisonic, and then converting that to 5.1, and then putting the mics down the center channel. And so, but that is us kind of going down another path so that we can interactively control how much ambient you hear. But I don't think you actually heard enough ambient a lot of times.
Ronnie?
This is also to the ambisonic thing. I have this MixPre 6. Is that enough to have the Sennheiser ambisonic? It only needs 4 channels, right?
Yeah.
So I can have the two other interviewer microphones coming
for
in.
Recording, it's enough, but you can't process it. So the problem is that what I mean by that is it'll process, and I believe the MixPre 3 will let you preview it in binaural through the headphone jack, so you can actually listen to something like it when you're recording. It has there might be an extra plugin, I'm not sure, but anyway, but the problem with the MixPre 6 is getting it out of it. So the reason that we're using a larger one is that, I need to get them in, and then I need to get them out. And even getting that out, I have to take 2 channels out of to get all the channels that I want out of that system. I have 2 mics and then the ambisonic. And so for us, that we had to build a special cable to come out of the MixPre, out of the Scorpio, and we'll show all of that as we get ready for the show. We're going to start building that up next week. But it's going to be a much simpler show than what we just saw. It's really just focused on the HDR and 5.1 solution at Cinegear. So it'll be a single camera going. We'll probably have both days, but it'll be short. It'll be there'll be 2 hour hits.
Next question.
From Roberto Barrow in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. I'm looking for a multicolor light to illuminate 2 20-foot arched areas that I can control via Wi-Fi over 100 feet. Or is wired DMX the way to go? I want to control them from our tech booth at our church. Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
DMX. But what I would do is I'd probably get Ethernet, use some, ArtNet or something like that to get there, and, keep the DMX controller itself, the cabling short. And do as much as you can with Ethernet. So that would be my recommendation, is to not, you can use, there's a variety of controllers, DMX King, and I have another one over there, that will, so that you can have all your controls coming via IP, and then you're going to convert them in that last little bit. But literally, if it was me, I would have the DMX receiver on the light, or right on the thing that's whatever's holding the light, and have a little cable going up to it, whether it's a 5-pin or a 3-pin. But I would definitely not, under any circumstances, use Wi-Fi to control a light that mattered.
And that's going to take us to the top of our first hour. If you're new here and you picked us up this week while you saw us bopping around NAB, welcome. Just a reminder, this is our Saturday, so it's our weekend general Q&A, where we have a training day for some of our, some of the panels that you see in the weekdays, you won't see in the weekends, vice versa. Also, it's our meeting day. So one of the great things about Office Hours is that it's a show by us, for us, and which means it's a volunteer organization. And today we have our new volunteer meeting after the show at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Yep,
9 o'clock. Sorry.
And we'll put out an announcement in Discord.
I've got so many time zones this week.
Exactly.
Just flying me all around. But there will be an announcement in Discord. Also, if you aren't in the Discord and you're not in Makana and this community excites you and you want to join, just go to officehours.global. Click join us at the top. That'll get you on our daily email. You'll find out what we're talking about every day, but you'll also get links into our Discord and into Makana so that you can get involved in the community. And it really is a vibrant community. It's one of the things that when folks walked up to me on Sunday at the booth and said, well, what do you guys do? And we said, well, we make a show for us. And we're a great community. And then my favorite question was, well, so how do you guys make money? And it's like, well, we're a nonprofit. We're a volunteer organization. We make a show that we want to see. And it's one of the coolest places. But again, the new volunteer meeting is the best place if you're interested in becoming more of a part of the community for you to sign up and see how you can contribute and where those opportunities are. And welcome back. We've got more questions coming up for the second hour today, so let's go to the next question. TJ?
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia says, what items that you saw at NAB would you buy, both within your budget and unlimited budget?
Ooh, unlimited budget. Go ahead, Ronnie.
If we start in the unlimited budget section, no, I'm just joking. I saw a few really cool things that I'm really wanting to buy. Most of them are actually from Blackmagic's new 2110 plethora of products. I saw this podium unit that we always would have wanted to have with inputs and outputs. The client can put their own laptop into that, and we can get 2110 image fed back to us in the front of house, and then we can adjust anything and put out other images that we return back to them, either as a conference screen or maybe even to the projector inputs that are always in the wrong place in absolute all the venues we are. So getting my feet wet with the 2110, which is really low budget if we compare it to the real big brother of 2110. That's a few things, and FR7s are of course on our purchase list for this year. I'm not sure how we're going to remote control them, but probably some kind of remote control. If not, Guy is continuing to have his hands on the remote control that we used during the NAB shows. And there is so much I would like to talk about. And eventually I saw this big screen that Alex brought to the stand, the TCL. So I'm getting more and more kind of looking into what actually TCL, even if they are not having products on the stand. I'm looking into that brand. It looks like they have decent quality and really cool products for the time being, and also the different rigging vendors that we saw. Small rig, we are always purchasing stuff from, and there are Condor Blue that are really having some cool products that I would like to see. And this guy with these kind of straps for cabling, etc., with adjustment thing, that's something I'm going to order. So that's a few of them. And I ordered some stuff yesterday that will be getting into my office in the next week, hopefully. So,
go ahead, Alex.
I think the thing that isn't released yet, but they did have it on display at the Blackmagic, was their 17K 65 mil camera. So this is, if you look at this is Super 35. So if you think about your camera, this is Super 35. This is what I'm talking into right now. This is full frame sensor. So that's what all the Sonys that we were using, the Sony lent us from the last one, the FX6. And this is the 65 millimeter 17K. And there's two, so this camera is a beast. The rumors are that it'll be in the 25,000 range, but for that size sensor, not too bad. So anyway, but if you look at that, there's two things about this. One is it's just going to make 17K now starts to get you close to IMAX resolution. So I don't know. We can talk about what exactly that means, but IMAX resolution, most people will say the equivalent is somewhere between 17 and 20K. 17K and 20K is somewhere in that range. So now you're starting to get into it, but it also means that if you had a dual lens, you could put two circles on there. And that would give you potentially 8K, 8K per eye resolution. Now, it appears to be only 60 frames per second max, which for the VR stuff would matter, for the film stuff wouldn't matter. But that one looked really, really interesting. Of course, on Hertz was something that I was pulled over to look at, and it looks pretty impressive. I think we're going to do some research on how we might use that. That's a nodal audio processor, so you can, so there's a Lavo also has a lot. We saw a lot with audio that are coming out, but those are some of the things that caught my eye. A lot of the new NAND lights that were released look really interesting to me. We covered that in the show, and so looking at our future lighting needs, those could be pretty interesting for us. We used a bunch of the new NAND light Pavo Slims. They lent them to us for the show. And what's really nice about them is the ballast is all completely separated and has a fairly long cable. So the light is nothing. Like the light is like this tiny little, you can apply it to anything kind of, and they've got these little, what we found useful is that they've got little 1/4-20s on the corners so that you can kind of build a grid with them if you want to relatively easily, which we thought was really useful. So anyway, so those are some of the things that caught our eye.
Not necessarily released at NAB, but got to see it in person for the first time, was that ILX LR1 little box camera. And when you walked over to the Sony booth, it was just so cool. I mean, you go from the Venice 2 to the Burano right down the line. But if you go all the way to the other side of this wall, they had this little photogrammetry setup where you could, they had a photogrammetry setup where they had 3 LR1s next to one another, 61 megapixel, and then triggering within 3 milliseconds of one another. The cameras were plugged in with a USB to Ethernet into the back of them somehow, and they were using this to generate a 3D model of this little. So if I had unlimited budget, I would buy a little array of these and start having some fun.
Yeah, and the real advantage there is that those are 61 megapixels. So those LR1s are 61 megapixel. I did get a chance to talk to them after we got a chance to talk to them while I was there. I talked to I believe the product manager. And they're not good video. We thought they'd be a great webcam. He was like, no, we'll have a heat problem. So they're not built for that. They're really built for around that still photography. So I think that, but I think they're amazing cameras. And again, for building the arrays that CJ was talking about, imagine probably 6 or 8 of them around something, you would get an enormous amount of data that you could shoot to build. Because right now the problem is the way they displayed it made sense, except for the fact that you have a lot of occlusion. There's a lot of stuff that they can't see. But imagine having them as an array around something at a couple different levels. You could theoretically build a digitization station that would be able to grab an enormous amount of detail from different items.
So you're saying that I need to buy the FX3 is still the answer? The LR1 is not the camera, the video camera?
The LR1 is not the camera you're looking for. So it's...
But I want 61 megapixels. I guess get them both.
The 61 megapixel. Well, a lot of the Alpha, the A7 R4 and R3, I think, are both 61 megapixels as well. So those are still available. I can't remember what the price is for those, but they're expensive. But they are 61. And talking to folks that do it, I mean, we had Greg Downing on last week, and I think that resolution does matter.
It's one of those. It's not to take this down a total photogrammetry rabbit hole, but it's one of the things that since coming on office hours, it has tickled my want to 3D model everything to now be able to somehow capture real life and start to put those things together. It's one of the most exciting areas, and so to see how some of these rigs are built was the benefit. I think to me to actually going to a show was that you got to see it in person. It's fascinating. Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan. Tony says, it's been a minute. How are we doing with the Pro apps on the iPad Pro?
I still haven't used I still haven't found myself using a ton of Final Cut on the iPad Pro. I did, before Final Cut was out, I did edit a couple of things in the Resolve app, but it's tough because I'm sure for some people it makes sense, but I'm so fast on Mac OS that sometimes it feels hard to take it to the other side. Alex?
Yeah, I haven't really gotten into it. I have them, and I'm unfortunately paying the subscription for them, but not really using them that much. I think I have a hard time with thinking that way, and I think that, and most, so that's been like, I open up the iPad and then I start fiddling with it, and then I find myself going right back to my desktop just because I need more controls and I need more things, and I need it to be integrated with larger storage. I think that there's a market for it. I just haven't found it for myself. And so that's the challenge that I've had so far.
Next question.
Joaquin Matus from Imperial Valley, California says, while walking the show floor at NAB, I noticed a lot of smart stackable products, batteries, power distribution, antenna distribution being showcased. Why is this the case? Simply technological advancements? Or is there an industry demand for this? Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I think that there's always an industry demand for making things more efficient, making them easier to stack. I mean, if you look at the beast that I built, the big thing that I'm going to be working on with that camera is how to reduce the GAC that's there and pull it into something. It had to be built that way. I felt like it had to be built that way initially because I didn't understand. I hadn't tested or didn't have time to test heat. Heat and weight and all these other things that I was building it up as we went. And so I just kind of kept things spaced out so I wouldn't have to worry about those things, but pulling them all back in makes sense. And in the same way, batteries and communications and everything else, having these things all start to stack together, makes a big difference. And so I think we'll see more and more of that.
I felt like Edwin or whoever else would have been operating the camera, just that Vislink transmitter got so hot. I just feel it was cooking them.
It was a little warm. It
should have came with an oven mitt.
Yeah. The receiver was warm, but it sat on the other side, And again, part of what I was doing there was kind of moving antennas away from each other, trying to get the antennas out somewhere that they're not being occluded. I think we did much better. For instance, I don't believe we had almost any hits with the audio from the wireless mics. I think that we've in the past had everything glumped together too much, and I think we did better there. And so, again, without being able to test, I think that we can make it more efficient, but I think that we kind of put it out there in a way that could be managed.
Next question.
From Brandon Buttram in Indianapolis, Indiana. Brandon says, will the new Shure MV7 Plus suffer from the same issue where you have to crank up the preamp on your XLR interface? Can I ditch my Dynamite stick if I upgrade from the original MV7?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I think so. The people I've talked to is stating that the problem is smaller than it used to be, and on the bigger brother. So I think you can ditch that. I'm not entirely sure until I have them. I ordered them yesterday, 4 of them. I'm going to have them in the podcast studio that we rent out to our clients. So I really hope the problem is gone, as I've been told.
And we finally get USB-C. Goodbye, micro. Next question.
From Gary Lund in McKinney, Texas. Gary says, great coverage of the show. Did anyone get to look at the Grass Valley camera?
Go ahead, Alex.
I looked at it a little bit. I think what you're talking about are the LDX 135 RFs and the LDX 150 RFs. And these are using a variety of RF built into the camera, 5G camera solutions as well. I think that what's interesting is that I think that the only thing I would say is the type of show that demands Grass Valley also feels like it's the type of show that you want to be wired. Like it just matters. Like these are really expensive systems. And so I would rather have I feel like I'd rather have something like Vislink, like what we used, on the outside of the camera than building it into the camera. So it may be popular and it may be working. It just doesn't. I'd rather have a specialty unit managing that as opposed to having it built into the camera. So that's the only question I had.
Next question.
From Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. Paul says, are there any new developments in Adobe's generative AI coming out of the National Association of Broadcasters show?
Yeah, one or two things. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to go over there. Did you see it, CJ? Did you look at the generative AI?
Well, I just thought if you looked at what they were doing with Premiere, I mean, the ability to do that, to have some of the Photoshop style fixes where we're going to remove this or we're going to extend a frame, a couple things, to be able to do that in video and have it be convincing. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Anybody that's doing documentary stuff, or anybody who's had a challenging edit where they're really looking at, can I get just, even sometimes it's one or two frames until the next thing's perfect. Now, it's going to be just like a lot of things with AI, it's going to be trial and error. But I'm, for the first time in a long time, have wanted to open up Premiere instead of having to be forced to open up Premiere on my Mac to actually play with it.
Yeah, I will say the Photoshop version of that I use all the time. I change, oftentimes changing aspect ratios is the big thing. Like, I need a little more room. Someone sent me a vertical image and I need to be wide, and I just make it wide. Or someone sent me something that's really letterboxed and I need to make it 16 by 9. I just make it 16 by 9. And I've been surprised at how quickly I can just hit. You don't even type anything in. You just literally hit go and it just fills it in. And sometimes I might give it a 2 or 3 iterations, but I've been surprised at how often I end up with something that I can use.
We had a gentleman that was retiring after 20 years, and then another guy that was with us 25 years who we were celebrating at the same time in Cleveland this week. And a couple minutes before we gave the 25-year plaque to this guy, somebody gives me a picture from 2003 and says, "Hey, can you put this up on the screen?" And the faces are blurry and it's cut off in a weird spot. I went into Photoshop. It was literally had someone's arm cut off right here. I drug Photoshop and I said expand. It completed his arm perfectly as if it was normal. And then I took it into Topaz AI, fixed the faces, upscale to put it up on the screen. Everybody's like, "Wow, that picture is so clear." And I'm just sitting there smiling to myself.
Yeah, no wonder.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Next question.
From Brandon Buttram in Indianapolis, Indiana. Brandon says, I saw the OC ATEM knockoff switcher at NAB and bought one when I got home. Will I need or even be able to use Mix Effect?
Go ahead, Samuel.
No, you won't be able to, because the Mix Effect Pro uses the same the protocol in Blackmagic ecosystem, and that's one of the advantages of Blackmagic, is because you can use the same control interface and software on both the small ones and the bigger ones.
Ronnie?
Yeah, what Samuel said, and in addition, I don't think the new OC, I have to verify that 100%, but I don't think it has an open API that you can control via the Ethernet, but take it with a pinch of salt. I'm not entirely sure of that.
Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III from Oklahoma City asks, can you describe how to make the NAB roaming camera rig, but for less than $3,000, using camera with zoom, using wired LAN and or Wi-Fi?
Alex?
Yeah, that's step number 2. So we're gonna be working on trying to figure that out. So it's that camera rig was $100,000, more than $100,000 to do that camera rig. Mostly because of the transmitter. That transmitter system that we had, that pair, was $100,000 by itself, or $98,000. I only know because I got a thing of this is what you'll pay if you lose it, which is why we paid for security. So anyway, fortunately I all got home. But yeah, so I have a feeling that what I'm going to be going towards is some kind of iPad, iPhone solution. And I'm trying to figure it out exactly what that'll look like. The hard part is really making it look nice, in the way that we did. So, but I am going to try to build a less expensive one. I think getting to 15,000 from 100,000, could be, doable. Getting to 3,000, I think, will be a lift. But I do think that it's because even minimal, what I would consider minimal viable wireless, is going to cost me $3,000. I just think that's where I'm at to get the minimum of what I would consider okay to do this kind of thing with. And again, we're going to probably we'll see how often Vislink's willing to send me a really expensive kit. But if they are, then we'll be using the Vislink stuff pretty heavily. They have a new one this big that would work for us. I mean, literally, it's like this little tiny box, and I don't understand how it actually works, but they're very confident. So we'll see how that goes.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, so we're giving this a lot of thought this last few years, and if you're going to do it without professional link like the Vistlink or similar technologies, which actually are able to be put in a booth somewhere where you have good internet, etc. So on these show floors, internet is a scarcity and really, really expensive to get stable. So if you're then going to rely on cellular networks or mobile phones or whatever, you of course have all those problems related to bad coverage inside all these booths. And that differs from venue to venue. And of course, inside the Las Vegas Convention Center, you also have big differences in cellular coverage inside the centers themselves. So what we have been thinking of is just use a phone and have many of them. So the only thing we actually need from Zoom is the ability to manually choose the correct microphone input, regardless of what equipment you're using, so that we can actually manually select the correct microphone, and then we can start playing using Zoom directly on the iPad or the phone. So that's kind of the last missing link that we see, and you can have this on stabilized heads. You can probably pretend it's a PTZ. You can use good external audio interfaces, because that's a big problem in all these venues. So a phone with a new updated Zoom app where you can choose the input and some kind of input, even a Mixpeer 3 or 6 can be used as an input with noise assist and good microphones on top of that. It's a good start to start playing with. So we just need that manually mic selector.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, we're going to do a lot more. There's different needs for different things. As Pedro's trying to get into smaller events, and we want to build one that doesn't look as as intimidating as the one at NAB. A large rig actually got us a lot of attention. I got a lot of meetings because of it. So it didn't hurt us to have it at NAB, but that's not going to be the case when we're trying to go to the California Farm Show, which I would love to do with a wireless rig. And so I want to go to the big one in Iowa. I think there's a giant one in Iowa, and I just think wandering around with a wireless talking about tractors would be kind of like full circle for me. So anyway, so I think that we are going to be looking for ways to make it smaller. You can. The hard part with a lot of those, if cellular, is that the cellular just doesn't work. Like it just barely works in this, and so you have to. That's the whole game we played there, and the reason we need video was because cellular doesn't work very well, and so in most of those venues, and so we need a wired connection somewhere, and then we need a backhaul to that wired connection. So that's what created the chain reaction of doing this. But on a smaller event, an outdoor event that has good cellular, you could theoretically do a lot with an iPhone. And we're going to be testing that. Even two iPhone, I've seen them do two iPhones kind of caked together where one's acting like, and one of the rigs that I've been kind of experimenting with that I'm going to get back to is the iPhone, of course, has the HDMI out, so I could theoretically pop it out. And we're going to potentially, make some requests. I don't know what will happen, but we'll make some requests of Zoom so that we can make the output and the inputs a little bit more controllable on the iOS device, specifically for production.
Next question.
From Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. From NAB, did anyone compile a list of people or vendors to have on as a second hour?
Go ahead, Alex.
We didn't compile them, but man, did I meet a lot of people that want to be on the show. So stay tuned. So we definitely have people that are interested in being on the show. We've got some fairly high end folks that want to jump on the show. So stay tuned. It should be a good set of second hours. In fact, I think that what it really persuaded me of doing that is that we'll probably, and I also worked with, we worked with a couple different PR firms that work for a bunch of these groups. And so what we're looking at is working with them to really get that vendor relationship up. And I think that we'll probably lean more into bringing people on than less, for the second hour. So stay tuned for that.
Next question.
From Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia. Roz says, looking for a NAS system. Synology seems to be a solution, Mac user. Would there be any specific advantages to using a dedicated Mac Mini versus a dedicated Synology or other system?
Go ahead, TJ.
I have both. And the thing that a NAS gives you is vast storage in a single chassis. And so you don't, if you're using a Mac Mini and you want to have lots of expanded storage, then you're going to be in dongle world with various hard drives kind of hanging off the Mac Mini. And it's just going to be kind of a mess, whereas the NAS box, you'll just have it plugged in and it'll be a chassis. The other thing that a NAS device gives you is drive redundancy. And I have an 8-bay NAS device, and I have it set up so that I have 2 redundant drives on that. And I will recommend to anybody that if you're doing a NAS device, always have 2 redundant drives, because I learned from experience. I had an old NAS system that only had 1 redundant drive. When one drive went bad and I plugged another drive in, during the data rebuild, a second drive crashed, all the data was gone. So fortunately, I had another local backup, not just what was sitting on the NAS. So a NAS is a great place to start, but you'll also need a second copy somewhere else.
The other thing to think about, Roz, is what are you looking to do with it? Is it just for backup, or is it for I'm going to store media to be collaborated on by multiple machines? I'm going to need to access this data from afar. The flexibility that a Synology solution gives you is running some flavor of Linux right on the box. So there are apps and packages that are going to run on the Synology independent of any computer. So whether or not a computer's running or you have a utility going, you're still going to be able to have that drive connected to your network, or sometimes even connected to the internet, so that you can get at that drive remotely and get at your data, or do things like backup. Hey, this is my Dropbox, this is my OneDrive, this is my Google Photos, or things that syncing that back without having to have a computer in between is just nice peace of mind that you have a local backup of your ethos on the cloud. Next question.
From Craig Kadoki in Toronto. How hard would it be for future show floor streams to get a video from our exhibitor directly into our system instead of just shooting their screen with a camera when they are showing software or hardware?
Go ahead, Alex.
From our booth, not hard. We had that available. We just didn't have a lot of people bring stuff up to do that with. We only had we kind of thought that would, and I think it just happened to do with we scheduled really fast, and I think we need to think about that a little bit more. But for the booth, we didn't, we had the availability. You saw Andy did a great job of plugging into our system and showing off of tiles and everything else. And so that was, that worked well, and I think that we could do that with more people. We should have done it probably more aggressively. Again, we did a lot of new things, and so we learned a bunch of things. This will be dramatically different by the next NAB. Outside of what we're doing as office hours, I'll probably be doing a lot of these kinds of activation, so we'll get better at it. I think that going to someone's booth and asking them to do that will be almost zero chance that we'll do that. And that is a logistical problem. Hey, I'm here. I'm only going to be here for 20 minutes, but I'd like you to pull all your stuff apart and put it into my thing. I just don't think that's going to happen. One of the things that we're proposing to some conventions is to build a section. So sometimes you see these like little sections of booths that are a group, and I don't think it'll be next year, but the year after, our goal is to actually build an office hours like section inside of NAB that is built for broadcast. So if you're there, we kind of build a basic thing that we need so that we can cover you really well, and so the idea is that then we would work with you to have an HDMI output so we can, you would be tying into a main central server that we can get to. So that when we show stuff, we can cut right to it and everything else, but build something so that it is broadcastable as kind of a test. I think the great thing for us right now is we're kind of coming up to speed at the right time where a lot of conferences are ready to experiment. And so they've got room, they've got, interest, and we made a lot of great inroads with NAB. It's just such a great organization to work with. So, I think after having trouble finding the right people to talk to, we're talking to all the right people now, and they're been really open to a lot of what we're doing.
It's easy to forget how busy these conferences are for everyone, not just for us, but also the people that we're bringing into our booth are also slammed busy, probably from breakfast until dinner. every single day when they're out there. So any solution that we're going to put in is going to be, how can we make it as low friction as possible for the other people? Because the easier we make it for them to do it, the more likely they're going to show up and give us what we want. But really exciting first crack at it. I mean, just fantastic. Next question.
From JJ McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. JJ says, Alex, any feedback from the folks at NAB? Did they provide any RFIs for what they'd like from office hours next year?
Alex?
Sign the contract. Like they were like, I think they said that to me 10 times. They said it to people that were other people. Sign the contract. Let's get going. Let's get moving. Let's talk about next year. They just want to do more. You know, that was the biggest. Now, before the show, there was a lot of, I didn't know enough. What I needed to do is put CJ or someone else on helping me with like booth logistics so that they go through the manual, they understand what they're looking at. There was so much data. There are so many links to so many. There's half of it was Freeman, part of it was the convention center, part of it was NAB, and it was for someone who's not seen it before, and it's not my full-time job. You know, spending an hour or two a day to look at this stuff. I didn't get to all the things that we could have done, all the promotions we could have had. I missed some deadlines on things that they gave me room to do as a first-time, person, but we'll clean all that up, and so that's an easy thing to clean up. We're going to start meeting about NAB next year in May. So we're, so like this May. So we'll be, we're on. So we'll be starting to kind of ramp that up, and we'll use October as kind of the October NAB New York as kind of the test case for the next big NAB. And so we're already talking about that. They want to know how much we can expand, what we can do. We definitely had the best live stream there. And I know that's not the only measure of what we're doing, but it definitely got a lot of attention, and so there's a lot of people spending more money than we were, or with a lot more infrastructure than we had, that were not producing the kind of results that we were. And that really goes to the entire team, the back end team, the front end team, the infrastructure, everything. The lifts, while somewhat painful and not perfect, we definitely made an impression, and so I think that they were very excited. I think the folks from NAB, different people at NAB, probably spent 2.5 hours in our booth over that time, looking at what we were doing, talking to us about what we could do. They have a lot of things. We have to kind of figure out what makes sense for us, from a, anyway. But I think that there was a lot of excitement. So mostly the only real feedback we got is sign the contract, because I'd been touchy about like, I don't want to sign it until I know what booth I'm going to be in and everything else. They're just like, let's just get going, let's get moving, let's get this out, let's get, So it's gone from them not returning our calls to them, really working with us, and that really again is the efforts that have been done by everybody here over that, and again just finding the right team, and it's just the NAB team that we're working with is incredible, and we really enjoy working with them. So I think the next 2 iterations will be great.
2025, April 5th through the 9th at the Las Vegas Convention Center.
They're going earlier.
Yeah,
so
mark your calendars.
And then New York is in October. Is that right? Do we know it when? Let's see. NAB New York, I think, is in October. It's usually in October.
We're all frantically typing.
Yeah, you can hear the unit.
It's April. Nope. October 9th through the 10th, 2024 at the Javits Center.
Yeah, so that'll be, and that one's a smaller one, which is nice. I think that we can probably get coverage across the entire space, wirelessly, and then there's, I think AES is there as well. So it would be like we can probably have a video day and an audio day. So it should be a lot of fun.
Exciting. Next question.
Robert Green from Los Angeles says, I'm a Mac guy. Can you recommend a good PC system setup or specs to use with vMix?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I built a few vMix PCs. The most important thing is that you have an NVIDIA graphics card, because vMix uses the GPU heavily for encoding. That is my one recommendation. And then also vMix actually has a site with different reference systems. So you can either use AMD or Intel, but most of them they recommend Intel for, because they're better price to performance for what you get for it. And also one issue that I've been seeing that some people have been having is the motherboard lane. Some of the newer motherboards, they have limited motherboard lanes, and that can be quite challenging if you have like SDI or HDMI capture cards, that you get enough bandwidth on the motherboard. So don't get something off the shelf. Get like at least a name brand gaming card. And I'll post a link in the chat to some recommendations for different types of systems.
Next question.
From John Preto in Las Vegas. Did anyone else receive their access to Jonas and John Barker's newest product, Space Comms?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yes, and it looks really promising. We've been testing that for a few hours just, and the latency is incredibly low, and this looks really promising. I have a screenshot here or the interface in front of me. This is how it basically looks. So you have the possibility to have different types of organization. Then you have inside that organization, you can have groups. And in those groups, you can have different party lines. So this kind of is similar to Unity Intercom organizationally, would I say, and you can allow or disallow talk and listen for each of the different groups, and you can just easily, as easy as this in the web interface, add members to the group, and you just need a name, and you create a username and password, and you can send that also from inside the interface. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will find this tool to be really, really easy to use, and actually brings communication of pretty high quality to everyone. And of course, you use the web interface, so it's a kind of a web application or cloud application. So you have the same sound device source selector and the speaker selector that you have in most web-based communication tools or meeting platforms. So it's very similar, but the latency is really impressive.
And if you go on to the Byte Hive YouTube channel, you can see Jonas talking through a couple of those things. Also, if you want to check out more about it, just go to SpaceComms, C-O-M-M-Z, spacecomms.io. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III from Oklahoma City asks, what are easy wireless mics to use with the iPad or iPhone? What about handheld wireless options?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I wouldn't be kind of recommending anyone. There are so many out there. For iPhones with Lightning ports, you need to think about who has the Lightning port. For the Rode Go 2s that we have been using, we have two sets of those. You have one receiver which has USB-C on the output, and then you need a adapter cable to get it into Lightning, or just a USB-C cable to get it into the phone. And then you don't need to use any specific software or apps to have it working. That is mostly working with most applications inside the phone. The problem with using this, for instance, with the Zoom app, is that we can't manually select that microphone receiver as an input to the Zoom software or the Zoom app. So that would be a problem. And for some of the other solutions, like Shure, it does need the extra app to be working correctly, and you can record only into their own ecosystem. That's the limitations. And so you don't tell any or ask specifically what you're going to use this for. So be aware that cabled options is also a good one, especially if you are on a show floor where the wireless jungle is really, really difficult to handle.
One nice thing about a lot of these little microphones, and it seems like a lot of people have them now, whether it's the Rode Pro or the Rode Go or the DJI mic, they had the little single receiver with the two transmitters. The receivers and the transmitters, the clips for them all seem to also be the same size as your hot shoe mount on your camera. So if you have an iPhone and you're going to throw a small rig cage on it, that cage is going to have a little slot that you can slide that receiver into. And then just like Ronnie said, then you can run a USB-C to the camera or to the phone to get that wireless. And handheld, though, I'm not sure. It's worth the other thing it's worth mentioning is that some of the little wireless transmitters will have a mini jack, a 3.5 millimeter, that you can plug a microphone into. When I was on the show from Arizona on Tuesday, I guess, that was actually the DJI receiver plugged into the Mac, and then I had a little headset microphone plugged into 3.5 millimeter. It's not the most professional solution. It's not the cleanest solution in the world, but it was a way for me to get decent audio in without having to take so much of my rig with me, even though I still felt like I was taking a lot. Next question.
Francis Fry from Cambridge, Massachusetts says, Jeffrey, Blackmagic Design's website says, plus Hyperdeck Extreme 8K can now record 4 channels in a single unit. Does this reconcile with your understanding?
Jeffrey? I don't see a Jeffrey. This might be from another day. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that Hyperdeck Extreme, but maybe Ronnie has. If Ronnie wants to play, Jeffrey for today.
I can be Jeffrey. Call me anything. Okay, this is going to be a clean show, so I won't dig further in that. I'm not sure if we are talking about the previous question. Maybe it's related to the other one we asked a little bit earlier today. As I understand, it's not possible to record 4 different channels, but we'll dive into this and make sure that we give the correct answer. I'll just keep discussing this in Discord. So if you join in Discord, we'll have a good discussion about it, so that we are sure we don't give anything information that is not entirely correct.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, has anyone ever used Cubase as a digital audio workstation for linear tape-style music production workflows? I've been using Bitwig Studio since version 3, but I'm liking some of the Cubase UI features in contrast to the PreSonus Studio 1.6.
I feel like I haven't used Cubase a lot as a DAW since I think it came with an instrument that I had bought, like a MIDI controller from M Audio or something like that back in the day. And then I just got really spoiled with Logic. So maybe we're not the best panel to answer this question today, Douglas, but what I would suggest is try to bring this back for Wednesday for Audio Day, and then you've got some of the the foremost DAW experts in there. Next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida. How long until the high-quality camera rig is an autonomous drone that's safe enough for a venue like NAB and quiet enough not to interfere with audio?
Go ahead, DJ.
Well, I think that last line is the key thing here. Quiet enough not to interfere with audio. Drones and such, the propellers spin so fast, they create such a high-pitched whine noise that anybody that's ever had to do any recording near where a drone is operating knows it's just a nightmare to try to deal with that. So I think we're not too far off from actually a rig being small enough to move around, because the collision detection is getting so good, but it's the noise that's going to take some time.
The other thing for a show or a venue like NAB is the safe enough part of that question, because it is so unpredictable in terms of you're not supposed to put things over a certain height in your booth, but when Techno Crane's doing a demo, or somebody's putting up an antenna, or somebody's putting up a tripod or something like that, or a C-stand high in the air, it becomes pretty unpredictable in terms of what it's going to run into. And it's not so much that I'm worried about the drone running into things up in the air. It's what does it hit when it falls down. I've crashed a couple drones, and it's not pretty. And I wouldn't have wanted to be on the end of those propellers as they were coming in there, because, like as TJ said, they're quite fast. But yeah, they're noisy. But maybe someday they'll come up with some way to invert the blades so that they cancel each other out. I don't know. Next question.
Roz Humphreys from Comox, British Columbia. What is the best way to calculate bandwidth for my NAS need? The majority of my use case would be direct connection and secondarily remote access. Is this a reasonable queue?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Well, you can do a lot of calculations, but the one thing it comes down to is to test and see what you get in the real world, because there can be a lot of variables depending on how you're connecting to it. If you're going over like a network, then it can be a congestion in the network or limitations in the network switches, for example. But what I've often found is that the write speed of the drives can be the real bottleneck in a NAS. So you have to check and see in your use case and what drives you have. That's probably the biggest bottleneck.
You go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, this is something I've been kind of dealing with recently. I'm using my NAS for storage on stuff that I'm accessing sort of real time, as it were. And the bandwidth that I have with my 1 gig network is such that nothing else really accessing the NAS, so it should be able to handle. And but it's a little questionable for what I'm doing right now, so I'm actually thinking of maybe stepping up to a 10 gig. But as Mickey says in the chat, need to start by looking at the bit stream of the material that you're working with and how many streams of at these bit rates that you're going to need to be accessing from that NAS. And then you're going to need to calculate that and allow some overhead or extra room for growth for that.
Yeah, and when you think about network connections, you've got to remember USB. So if you're at a 10 gigabit per second, a 1 gigabit per second connection is on most of your home switches. USB-C is just regular old, or 3.0 rather. USB 3.0 was a 5 or a 10. Thunderbolt's at a 40 gigabit per second connection. So you're already taking, assuming nothing else is running through your network, you're already taking the bandwidth that the drive manufacturers think is needed for this kind of work, and you're cutting it by a fourth, or you're cutting it by a tenth if you're on a 1 gig connection. So if you're, again, it's are you using it for video, or are you just using it for, set it and forget it, time machine style backup, and that'll get you where you need to go. Next question.
Robert Barrow from Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. I'm somewhat new to network switches. Can a network switch be used to control both PTZ cameras and DMX lights simultaneously?
It's going to depend on a couple things. It's going to depend on the protocols that you're using to control those devices. Are you just connecting to the IPs directly, or are you using, a proprietary protocol? If you do find that there is crosstalk, you want to get a managed switch so that you can start to use things like VLANs to isolate. But as Mickey said, to isolate the different protocols so that you're not getting any sort of interference. But like Mickey says in the chat, it depends. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, DMX per se does not travel through network. It has to be converted first to either streaming ACN or other protocols. So the answer is somewhat kind of, you can't control DMX lights by connecting their 3-pin or 5-pin DMX plug to a network interface. That will not work, just to be sure. I am, though, kind of thinking of that you are talking about ArtNet or streaming ACN instead, so that can be run simultaneously on the same network. Just be sure that you are not mixing this with high bandwidth required things like NDI. That could cause some trouble. I've also seen on our networks that if we mix ArtNet and streaming ACN with Dante audio or other audio protocols, it causes some kind of delay, and packets are easily lost in that transmission. So the solution for that is to just create different VLANs for light control and audio and video.
And Mickey mentions in the chat that ArtNet and streaming ACN are very chatty, so VLANs are the answer. Also from the chat, John Preto, our friend John Preto, reminds us that throughput is measured in bits and data storage is measured in bytes. So don't forget about there's 8 bits in a byte, and you don't want to overstate yourself. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today on another wonderful Office Hours Saturday. Welcome to anybody who's joining us for the first time or for the first couple times. If you've picked us up from NAB, it's great to have you here. Remember, if you like what we do and you'd like to find out more about that, you can always go to officehours.global, and then there's a Join Us button on there that can get you on our daily email so that you can get into more about the community, the Discord, the mailing list, into Makana, that sort of thing. Also, coming up at the top of the hour in 12 minutes, we've got the new Office Hours Volunteers meeting. So if you are interested in what we're doing and want to contribute or find out how you can contribute, this is the primer, the 101 on what are the opportunities to get involved. As far as the show goes, tomorrow we've got Sunday, which is our introspection. And then the rest of the week, we break out the weekdays kind of. Monday is our business vertical, Tuesdays graphics, Wednesdays audio, Thursdays are video, and Friday is infrastructure and logistics, followed by our Saturday weekend Q&A. And then our Sunday, which is, again, it's not a broadcast show. It's not a recorded show. It's more of an introspective look. We can talk about some more philosophical things, more of an internal discussion. But it's a great way to find out more about Office Hours. Couple thank yous to go around today. Thank you to our panel for being here and helping answer the questions this morning. It's great to see people from all over the world every weekend. I went from seeing Ronnie in Vegas to seeing Ronnie and Samuel when I was in Arizona, and now I'm seeing Ronnie and Samuel here in Pennsylvania. They're always they're friends. They're just on the other side. TJ's from Minneapolis, so it's, we're not as exciting. We're just Americans. It's global. Also, thank you to our producers for asking such great questions today, not only as an overflow from some of what we had from NAB, but also just generally. They get those questions into us all the time at askofficehours.global and do a great job keeping us on our toes. Sorry, I just saw JJ in the chat said United States of Americans. He made me laugh. Also, thank you to our back-end crew. Who are cutting the show, who are making us look and sound good, who are making sure that we can see how loud we are on the meters, who can make sure that we're ushered into this meeting and broadcast out to you without skipping a beat. It's really amazing to see what that small village of folks who wake up every single day, 7 days a week, to bring this show to you can do. And it's all thanks to them. On the Tulalip Traversal today, I don't have one. So we got a lot of bananas. That's all I know. We'll see you in Office Hours. After Hours. I knew there was something there.
101,000 miles, 163,000 kilometers, 800 million bananas for scale.
How did I miss that? All right. Well, there it is. 800 million. That's a lot of bananas for a Saturday. Good job, everybody.
It seems actually that the newest...
Seems the bananas are larger or smaller now. I think that's the plantains.
It's inflation.
But the question about the recorder, it seems that it can actually record simultaneously 4 inputs. But I don't think they have. There is no syncing on the inputs. So I'm believing that you have to have a referenced. Synchronized coming in from all the cameras. I think that could be the culprit. So if you're listening now, check in Discord and we'll discuss this further.
I've completed the round trip though. I went from Eclipse, Ohio, back to the office.